Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! Today I have for you a crisscross pocket card. This is a card that looks kind of complicated to make but isn't really. I was so impressed with this card. And it's called a crisscross pocket card because we have a little crisscross on the front and there's a pocket where you can put a little note card. So this design is inspired by Audra Monk, the Crafty Yogi. She is a fellow Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. And I had my eye on this card design for a while, but I wanted to save it for a time when I had a little extra time to play because I thought it would be really complicated and that I'd need that extra time. Well, guess what? You don't need the extra time. You don't need hours to put this card together because it is super simple. So I'm going to teach you how. The first thing you are going to need is a piece of cardstock that is 8.5 by 11. You don't need a lot of supplies for this, which is really cool. And I'm going to run through the three things we're going to use with my paper trimmer really quick before we get started. So cardstock 8.5 by 11. This is a piece of Misty Moonlight. You will need a piece of designer series paper that is 5.25 by 4. You want something that is non-directional, and you're going to see both sides on the card. So you want to make sure you like the front and the back. And if you use a paper with a direction to it, it makes it really complicated to try to make the card look right from all angles. So something that's non-directional is a lot easier to deal with. And then you will need for the note card on the inside a piece of basic white that measures 5 by 7. And we're just going to turn this into our own little note card. So I'm going to bring over my paper trimmer. This is a perfect tool to use for this project. And I am going to extend my arm here, although I probably don't really need it, but that's okay. If you do not have a demonstrator you are working with currently and you'd like a paper copy of the catalog, you can reach out to me through my website or the comments here in this YouTube video or over on Facebook at The Faithful Stamper. I'd be happy to send you a catalog. So, the first thing we're going to do is take our cardstock, which is 8.5 by 11, and I believe in working smarter, not harder, so rather than cut and then score twice, we're going to score once and then cut once. So, keep it simple. And we're going to take our cardstock, slide it over to 5.5, and I'm going to score right down the middle. And then once that score line is there, I'm just going to turn the other direction so my 8.5 side is at the top. And this time I'm going to cut at 4.25. So I'm going to be left with two rectangular pieces of cardstock. Now what I want to do to create this card is I basically want to take these two pieces and form a little house. I want to take off the top two triangles here. So here's the best way to do it, and this is the trickiest thing you're going to do in the whole card. Take your two pieces, flip one on top of the other. I always flip the right one over to the left. Now we're going to cut these both at the same time on a diagonal. So we're going to cut from the top corner here down to the score line. So the trickiest thing you have to do is hold your cardstock together so that you get the same angle. So hold them together, put your point here in your cutting track, and then line up your score line here at the bottom. Hopefully, I don't know if you can see that. But once my score line and my point are on the cutting track, I can fold my cutting arm down, and I like to start in the middle so that I don't inadvertently damage the corners of my cards. That way it doesn't wrinkle the cardstock. So these two triangles that we've created, you can set that aside and use it on a different project. So you should be left with two pieces of cardstock that look like a house when you put it together. Now set those aside for a moment and grab your piece of designer series paper. It's 5.25 by 4. And we're just going to cut this on the diagonal. So point to point on the cutting track. And you're going to create two triangles. And then last but not least, we're going to take that piece of basic white. It's 5 by 7. And on that 7-inch side, we are going to score it at 3.5, and basically with this, we are creating our own little note card. Just like so. All right, so assembly for the card. So we've got our rectangular pieces of DSP we made our little triangles with, and we have our little house. First up, just fold on your score lines. You can burnish these with a bone folder to give yourself a nice crisp edge. And these two pieces create the crisscross, because what we're going to do is take them and glue them together, and this forms the base of our card. So I highly recommend for this card liquid glue. I am normally a huge advocate of tape runners. That's my preference, but for this card especially, liquid glue is a lot easier to work with. And a little tip you might want to do, I very often forget this, but it's always handy to have a damp paper towel handy when you're working with glue, just in case you get a little extra. I'm forever getting glue stuck on my fingers. So you do not need a lot of glue. This is our green, some people call it green glue. It's Tombow multi-purpose glue. I just peeled the label off mine because it was getting in my way. And then once I've got the glue here, I can lay my cardstock right up on that score line and just line it up together. And the glue allows me to have a little flexibility. If I was to put it down and it wasn't quite straight, I'd have time to move it, where if I put a tape runner down, pretty much my paper's gonna stick right away and then I don't have room to move it, and I'd have to cut another piece. So this way with the liquid glue, you have just a minute to maneuver your paper. Now, my tip for adhering your designer series paper panels is to flip over your card. I find the less I have to hold down and try to work with, the better. So you're going to have one panel for each side of your card. You'll have a very narrow border. So again, the liquid glue is very handy for this because you can get right up into the corner. And I love the liquid glue only because you can leave the tip of the glue right on your paper and get right into those corners and get such a fine line with it. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue on both of these. I also like to have a little container, this is an old cap to something, that I can leave my glue in with the point down. And that way I'm not forever trying to shake the glue down to the tip. It's always ready to go when I am working with it. So, trickiest part here is to not get your fingers in the glue. Leave a very small border around the edges. And again, the glue lets you maneuver your paper. If you get it a little crooked, you have a moment to move it. And sometimes I need a moment. All right. And so just repeat this on the other side with this other panel. Again, a little bit of a border around and then press down. And I'm just gonna wipe my fingers real quick with that damp paper towel. Now, one more bit that we have to glue. And this is where you have a decision to make. So we've got our card and we've got our crisscross panels ready to go. You need to decide at this point which panel you want on the top and which panel you want on the bottom. So what I like to do is fold my card together and say, okay, does it look good? Is everything lined up? Or do I like it this way? I don't know. So sometimes there's a necessity for one of the panels to be on the top. Maybe something's a little crooked on the other one. This one looks okay, so I'm going to glue this blue panel down first. You can use tear and tape for this, but I stuck with the liquid glue. You just need a very narrow strip along the bottom down to your corner. And then I like to press in from the outer edge into the card. And then I repeat on the other side. So another thin strip of glue. Make sure I'm getting that corner down. And that is the last I need of the glue for the night. And then again, I like to press from that outer corner down to make sure these panels are laying flat. And then I'm just going to give this a second to set. I'm going to press it with my hands for a second. And then I'm going to set this to the side while I do a little bit of stamping. So, and I did not, I have a problem here. I just realized my cardstock does not line up. So I did something goofy somewhere. So let me see what I need to fix. Yep, somehow I cut my cardstock just a little bit too long. So I needed to take, there we go, that's better. Take a 1/4 inch off there. Sorry about that. So for this card, I could absolutely just use a blank note card and put it here in the pocket. However, I want to dress it up a little bit. So it's up to you how fancy you get. First thing I'm going to do is take some cinnamon cider, and I'm using the Forever Fern stamp set for some of my verbiage and for the florals. So it comes with this speckle stamp. I love stamps like this because you can use it as an accent or you can use it as a background. I'm going to use it for a line across the top of my card. So I'm just going to take this little speckle stamp and some cinnamon cider ink and stamp my way across the top of the card. It's just going to give it a little something to look at when I put that card in the pocket. Next, I'm going to take some pumpkin pie ink and add some foliage. This is one of my favorite stamp sets. I just love how it looks when I stamp. The images are beautiful. And then I could leave it just like this, but I want to add one more. So this is Cajun Craze ink. And what I'm going to do is take my stamp, ink it up, and remember, don't do CPR on your stamps, just tap gently. I'm going to stamp one time here, and I want kind of a watermark effect on the inside, so without putting any more ink on the stamp, I'm simply going to stamp again on the inside of the card. So you can see the image is faded, and that way I can stamp my sentiment right over top, and it'll still show up, but I'll have a little something there in the background. So my sentiment is done in Misty Moonlight ink right over top, and there you can still read it, but there's a little something in the background. And then I did previously stamp my envelope corner with that matching smaller floral, and that way my envelope has a little window dressing too. So to finish up, I'm just going to take my note card, and you can see how putting this little speckle across the top just adds to the card. Now I have some ribbon. This is Misty Moonlight ribbon to match my cardstock. I'm going to tie a bow around the front of the card. So I'm going to take a little extra ribbon there. I am not the world's best at tying bows. You'll see why in a minute. But I'm just going to take this ribbon. You can very easily leave this off if you're not a fan of bows. You can tie it in the middle of your card. You can tie it off to one side, which is what I'm going to attempt here. Normally I do faux bows because I am not at all keen on bow tying. But that looks relatively good. So I'm just going to trim up these edges. I'm going to trim my ends and angle them to help with fraying. And I'm just going to slide this down for a second because I want to add one more thing. I have a small circle that I cut out of the layered circles, and I just want to accent the front. So my dimensionals, there they are, thought they walked away. I'm using mini dimensionals for this, and what I'm going to do is going to put one on either side of my little crisscross right here at the center. And by doing it this way, I know that my dimensionals are not going to cause this note card to stick to the rest of the card. I want it to be able to move freely. So if I was using a bigger circle, I'd use the larger dimensionals, but since this is small, I'm sticking with the minis. And I'm just going to put that right there, the center of my card. And then I can maneuver my bow a little bit. So I've got my ribbon and my beautiful card is done. So how about that? Didn't that look like it should be a whole lot more complicated to make? I fell in love with this card. So I do have some more samples to show you. First up, I wanted to show you that you can do this card in a more vertical orientation. Mine was sort of out of necessity. For starters, I realized I wanted to use this beautiful peach paper, but when I cut it in half, I realized that this paper was a little more directional than I thought, and if I did the card the same way horizontally, my peaches were all the leaves were hanging sideways. So I thought, why can't I do it this way? And it also helped cover up a little mistake I made in cutting the paper, so I was able to kind of camouflage that until I was happy with it. And all I had to do was stamp my note card differently for the inside. So I added a little tiny accent stamp up here, which disappears under the flap of the crisscross pocket, but yet still conveys my message. So you can make the card in whichever orientation you want, and if you've realized that your paper is a little more directional than you thought, putting it together like this might be the way to go. Next, I have a Christmas card. Now for this one, I didn't do a folded note card on the inside. I took one of our largest scalloped contours dies, it's actually the largest in the set, and cut a piece of crumb cake. So you can see this beautiful border I have along. And if I want to write more than just my name on the card, I can sign my name here, but I can write my message on the back. I could even put a gift card here as well and just stick it on the card with the glue dot. So you could very easily turn this into a gift card pocket. So, but I just love how that scalloped edge looks in this card. It's also great to make baby cards with. This is actually designer series paper from our Pansy suite, and I immediately thought of jungle when I saw the little leaves here, even though they're pansy leaves. So I used our retired Wildly Happy set. But what I wanted to show you is you don't have to have a fancy note card with a fancy border. If you want to just keep the card a little bit more lighter weight, you can take a piece of cardstock, basic white or another light color, that is 5 1/4 by 3 3/4, and you create more of a postcard insert. So again, you could write your message on the back if you need more room. But this way, instead of a folded note card, you just have a plain postcard style insert that you can put inside your card. Then of course this can be for baby girls as well as baby boys. For this card I stuck with the postcard style insert, but I used our basic border set and I just used one of the dies to cut the top to kind of give that a little pizzazz. And again, I went back to the ribbon, so you can leave the ribbon off, you can put it on, whatever you like. And then last but not least, I have one more Halloween card, since it is October, and I used a different border die to create my postcard effect on the inside. So our basic border dies work very well with a styled card like this, and again, this is the more vertical orientation of the card. So I hope you enjoyed getting to learn how to make the crisscross pocket card. Not as complicated as you might think and perfect for any occasion. I would love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can hit that subscribe button and then hit the bell for notifications, and that way you'll be notified whenever I go live or post a new video, which is typically twice a week. You can also catch me over on Facebook as The Faithful Stamper. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy crafting.